Black CEO stopped by white billionaire in the VIP parking lot moments later. She revokes her access to the entire building. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to the story. The sun hung low, casting a golden hue across the parking lot of a luxury building in downtown. The night had just begun, but the air was already thick with tension. Vanessa Clark, the Black CEO of Summit Enterprises, walked confidently toward her car, wearing a simple yet elegant outfit. She didn't need the flashy jewelry or designer bags that usually marked the elite. Tonight, she was testing a world that often mistook her for less than she was. As she approached the VIP parking lot entrance, she felt the familiar eyes on her. She didn't let it show after all. She had earned every inch of her success. But today, the world was about to see her power in a way they hadn't before. As she swiped her card, the security guard hesitated. "Sorry, ma'am," he said, eyeing her from head to toe. "This is for VIPs only. Are you sure you're in the right place?" The words cut through the night like a blade, and Vanessa didn't flinch. She had heard this before. She had been turned away from places that should have welcomed her. But tonight would be different. She didn't need to shout, didn't need to make a scene. She was done being underestimated. She wasn't just going to walk away, she was going to take control. Moments later, her executive assistant, Carla, received the call. The protocol was set in motion, and the building's leadership would soon be at her mercy. As Vanessa calmly dialed, the first shift in power began. Watch closely, because what happens next will have consequences that ripple through every corner of this institution. Don't blink. Moments later, Vanessa steps into the lobby of Summit Enterprises headquarters, but it's not the luxurious decor or the staff's bright smiles that matter. It's the collective breath the room takes when they realize who they're about to face. They don't know it yet, but their power, their positions, everything they've built, will soon come crashing down. As she walks past the stunned security team, she calls in the first round of decisions that will redefine everything they've taken for granted. Now, with every second that ticks by, the power dynamic is shifting, and they have no idea what's coming. Vanessa steps into the office of the highest-ranking executive in the building, a man who once questioned her authority. He will soon learn that Vanessa Clark doesn't just own a company, she owns the future. She speaks, her tone calm but absolute. "I've just revoked your access to every corner of this building. Your tenure here ends tonight, and you'll never make the mistake of underestimating me again." The room goes silent. The man opens his mouth to protest but says nothing. The power that had once been held over her is now in her hands, and she's about to show them what happens when you disrespect the wrong person. Stay tuned, because this is only the beginning. Vanessa Clark stood still, her hand still holding the phone to her ear as she felt the weight of the situation settle in. The air around her felt thick with the tension she had just set in motion. Her words had already been spoken, and now it was only a matter of time before the ripple effect hit every corner of Summit Enterprises. As she waited for Carla's confirmation, she could hear the muffled voices of the executives on the other end, trying to adjust to the sudden shift in power. Vanessa remained calm, her breath steady, even as the reality of what she was about to do sunk in. She had never been one to act impulsively, but tonight, the stakes were different. The building had long been a place where she had to fight for recognition, where her achievements were always questioned, and where her presence was never truly respected. Now, that would change. "I need everyone in place," Vanessa said softly into the phone, her voice unwavering. "Activate protocol and let the board know we're starting immediate review. All of them, no exceptions." Her words rang out with the precision of someone who had calculated every move long before she made it. As she hung up, she turned towards the elevator, her heels clicking sharply against the polished marble floor. The doors opened, and she stepped in without a second glance, her posture exuding authority. As the elevator ascended to the top floor, she could already hear the murmurs from the staff. The silence in the hallway felt heavy, each footstep, each whispered word a reminder of how her very presence seemed to unsettle them. What they didn't know was that tonight would be their reckoning. The CEO, the one they had overlooked, the one they had underestimated, was now in full control. The elevator stopped with a soft chime, and as the doors opened, Vanessa stepped out into the boardroom. The executives were seated, their faces a mixture of confusion and cautious curiosity. They had no idea what was coming. She scanned the room, her gaze briefly lingering on each person before she spoke, her voice cutting through the uncertainty like a blade. "You've all been given a choice," she began, her words slow but deliberate. "Tonight, you will either accept the truth of what's happening here, or you will be left behind. No one gets to sit in this room any longer with the assumption that they are above the consequences of their actions. I've been patient long enough." The executives shifted in their seats, exchanging glances, but no one spoke. Vanessa continued, her tone growing firmer. "I am not here to beg for respect. I'm here to demand it. And that starts with you, and all of you, being held accountable for what you've allowed to happen within these walls." As she spoke, her assistant Carla entered the room, walking briskly toward Vanessa and handing her a stack of documents. "It's all here," Carla said quietly. "The full review of the past year, every complaint, every ignored email, every biased remark that was swept under the rug." Vanessa nodded, glancing over the papers. She had already read them all. The faces in the room grew uneasy as they realized what was about to happen. The truth was undeniable. This company has allowed itself to be complicit in a system that tolerates inequality, that overlooks people who don't fit the mold, people like me, Vanessa said, her eyes narrowing. "And that ends now." She placed the stack of papers down on the table, her gaze meeting each executive's eye. "Effective immediately, you will all undergo a full audit. Every one of you, your roles, your positions, everything will be reviewed. If you've been part of the problem, you will be removed. No one is exempt." The room fell into silence, the weight of her words hanging in the air. Vanessa stood tall, her posture unwavering, as she waited for any objections. There were none. The executives sat in stunned silence, their faces pale as they realized the depth of the shift that was taking place. For the first time in a long time, they were not in control. Vanessa Clark was. And this time, she would make sure it stayed that way. The room was still, as if time itself had frozen. The air hung heavy with tension, and the only sound was the slow, deliberate shuffle of papers as Vanessa Clark flipped through the files on the table. The executives, once full of bravado and confidence, were now just silent figures, waiting for the inevitable. Vanessa did not flinch. She had made her decisions. The cold, calculated moves she was about to execute were the culmination of years of being underestimated, overlooked, and disrespected. "You think you can continue running this company like this, don't you?" Vanessa's voice sliced through the silence, smooth but heavy with authority. She looked around the room, making sure every person felt the weight of her words. "You've dismissed the complaints, ignored the voices of those who were not part of your inner circle, and allowed your biases to shape the very culture of this place. But no more. Tonight, the truth is coming for all of you." The executives shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, exchanging quick glances but saying nothing. They had seen Vanessa's calm demeanor before, but they had never seen her like this, not in full control, not with the resolve that now radiated from her every word. "We are going to change this company, and it starts with every single one of you," she continued, her eyes locking onto each person in the room. "From this moment on, every action, every decision you've made will be under scrutiny. You will prove that you deserve to be here." The silence was deafening, but Vanessa's words cut through it like a knife. "I know how this works. I've been here long enough to see the patterns, to hear the whispers in the hallways, to watch how some people get passed over, dismissed, and how others rise, not because they're better, but because the system was built to favor them." She paused, letting the room absorb her words. "Well, the system ends tonight. From now on, every person here, every department, every policy will be held accountable, and that accountability starts with me." Vanessa's assistant, Carla, stepped forward and handed her another set of papers. As Vanessa looked over them, she could feel the weight of the moment. The names on the list were familiar long-standing executives who had been part of the problem. She didn't need to read the details. She knew what had been going on behind closed doors. "These names," Vanessa said quietly, her voice carrying the gravity of the decision, "are the ones who will be the first to go. I don't care about your years of service, your so-called loyalty, or your position. If you've contributed to the culture of discrimination and bias, you're out." The room shifted again, a few executives fumbling for words, but none daring to speak. Vanessa's gaze was unwavering, her resolve unshakable. This company will not be led by people who think they are entitled to power. It will be led by those who earn it, by those who see others for what they truly are: valuable, capable, and deserving of the same opportunities. She turned to Carla, who was standing just behind her, eyes wide with a mix of admiration and caution. "Activate the next phase. Get the emails ready. Let them all know." Carla nodded quickly, turning to exit the room. As she walked out, the door clicked shut behind her, leaving Vanessa alone with the executives. A final silence fell, one that was more tense than the last. Vanessa stood tall, the weight of leadership settling fully on her shoulders. She was no longer the woman they had dismissed. She was the woman who was about to rebuild everything they had taken for granted. The door to the boardroom clicked shut behind Carla, leaving the remaining executives to stew in their own anxiety. Vanessa Clark stood with a stillness that commanded the room, as if she were the eye of a storm, surrounded by tension but unshaken. Her phone buzzed once, signaling the next phase was underway. She could feel the collective breath held in the room, as if they were waiting for the inevitable. One by one, the executives glanced nervously at each other, but no one dared to speak. Vanessa, however, wasn't interested in empty words or half-hearted apologies. She had been given far too many of those in her career. The time for explanations was over. "You all know why you're here," Vanessa began, her voice as cool and precise as ever, her gaze unwavering as she met each executive's eye. "The emails are already being sent. Your roles are under review, and that review is not about your performance. It's about your character, your biases, and your actions. I'm not asking for apologies. I'm asking for accountability." She paused, letting the weight of her words hang in the air. "And if you think this is just a formality, that I'm only going to make empty threats, then I suggest you start thinking differently." The silence in the room deepened. No one moved. No one spoke. The executives, once so used to their positions of power, were now faced with the reality that they might not walk out of this meeting with their jobs intact. Vanessa let the tension build for a few more seconds before continuing. "You were all complicit in the culture that's been allowed to fester here. You ignored complaints, overlooked the very people who built this company into what it is today, all because of the color of their skin, the way they looked, or how they dressed. You allowed yourselves to believe that those things mattered more than talent, more than hard work, more than results." Vanessa's voice grew sharper, cutting through the room with a clarity that left no room for doubt. "But tonight, I will show you that your biases are no longer welcome here. Every person who has been overlooked, every person who has been treated like they don't belong, will now be treated with the respect they deserve. And if you can't get on board with that, you will be the ones who are left behind." There was a shift in the room as the executives realized that they were no longer in control of the situation. Vanessa was running this company now, and she would not allow anyone to stand in the way of the change that was coming. Effective immediately, Vanessa continued, "I am instituting a zero-tolerance policy for any form of discrimination, bias, or favoritism. From now on, every single decision made in this company will be held up to the highest standard of fairness. There will be no exceptions. If you can't meet that standard, then you won't be here to make decisions anymore." Her words were a stark contrast to the comfortable, familiar environment these executives had long known. The very foundation of the company was being shaken, and Vanessa wasn't about to back down. This company will be built on a foundation of integrity, equality, and respect. And if that makes you uncomfortable, if you can't handle it, then maybe you should reconsider your position here. As the room fell silent again, Vanessa knew that she had made her point. The executives understood now this was no longer just about her being a CEO. It was about a movement. A movement that would rewrite the rules of how Summit Enterprises operated. One that would finally dismantle the biases that had held it back for far too long. I will no longer tolerate mediocrity dressed up as excellence, and I will no longer allow anyone to profit from the suffering of others, Vanessa concluded, her voice steady but filled with resolve. The power had shifted completely, and there was no going back. The silence that followed wasn't one of defeat, but one of acceptance, a quiet acknowledgement that the world they had known was gone, and Vanessa Clark was leading them into a new era. As the silence stretched on, Vanessa Clark could feel the weight of the moment. The executives, their faces pale and stiff with disbelief, sat frozen in their seats. The room, once filled with the hum of casual power and unchecked privilege, now felt more like a courtroom, every gaze locked onto her, waiting for the next move. Vanessa took a deep breath, savoring the stillness, allowing the gravity of her words to settle in. She had known it would come to this. This was the reckoning, the moment when everything would shift, when all the wrongs would be laid bare and dealt with. But now, it was time for the next step. You may think I'm overreacting, Vanessa began, her voice as calm and composed as ever, though her words were edged with quiet authority. You may think that I'm doing this for the sake of justice, for the sake of some moral high ground. But let me make one thing clear, this is not about morality. This is about power. The power you have abused for years. The power that has allowed you to overlook the very people who built this company, the very people who gave it the strength to stand where it is today. You thought you could take it for granted. You thought you could treat them like they didn't matter. And now, you will learn that power is not something you hold, it is something you earn. She paused for a moment, letting her words settle in. The tension in the room was palpable, thick enough to cut through. No one spoke. No one dared to. I'm not just going to fire a few of you and call it a day, Vanessa continued, her tone hardening. That would be too easy. No, what I'm doing is much more important than that. I'm restructuring the very foundation of this company. You will be replaced, yes, but not just by anyone. You will be replaced by people who understand what it means to lead with integrity, with respect, and with accountability. She glanced down at the stack of files in front of her, a symbol of everything that had gone wrong within these walls. I'm not interested in hearing excuses. I've heard them all before. What I want to see is action. I want to see every department undergo an overhaul. Every policy, every procedure, every little corner of this company that has been built on the backs of people you deemed less than worthy will be examined. If you've been complicit in that system, you're out. There was a slight shift in the room, a few of the executives finally looking away, unable to meet her gaze. Vanessa noticed, but she didn't react. She had known this moment would come, the moment when their carefully constructed facades would crumble under the weight of their own guilt. This is not just about making sure you know I'm in charge, she continued, her voice gaining strength with every word. This is about making sure that everyone who works here understands that they are seen, they are heard, and they will be treated with the dignity they deserve. This company will not survive another day if it's built on the foundation of bias and exclusion. I will tear it down myself if I have to. The finality of her words hung in the air like a heavy storm cloud. There was no going back now, no turning back from the path she had set in motion. This was the beginning of a new era, and no one, not even the highest executives, would escape the consequences of their actions. I want a complete report on every individual who has been overlooked, who has been ignored, who has been passed over for promotion or opportunities because of their race, their gender, their appearance. I want names, I want dates, and I want explanations, Vanessa commanded. We will make this right, and if you can't stomach that, if you can't stand to be part of a company that values everyone equally, then you will leave. Your choice. The room was dead silent. Vanessa stood tall, the weight of leadership settling in her chest, but there was no doubt in her mind this was the right thing to do. This was her company now, and she would reshape it according to her vision, no matter the cost. She turned toward the door, her heels clicking sharply on the floor as she made her way out. The power had shifted, and there was no going back. Vanessa Clark walked out of the boardroom, the heels of her shoes clicking sharply against the polished floors, echoing through the empty halls of Summit Enterprises. Her mind was clear, focused on the long road ahead. She had made her point. Now it was time for the real work to begin. As she reached her office, the door opened automatically, and she stepped inside, taking a moment to breathe. The familiar, luxurious surroundings of her office, once a symbol of status, of power, felt different now. It wasn't just a place of comfort anymore. It was a place of change. The blinds were drawn open, allowing the fading light of the day to pour in, casting long shadows on the walls. She walked over to her desk and placed the stack of files Carla had given her earlier. Each one represented a person, a decision, a moment where something had gone wrong in this company. She ran her fingers over the top file, steadying herself before she opened it. It was time to get to work. Meanwhile, the executives were still reeling from the shock she had delivered, the consequences of their actions hanging over them like a storm cloud. She knew it would take time for them to process everything, but she didn't have time to wait for them. She had a company to fix. As she sifted through the files, her phone buzzed. It was Carla. "The emails are going out," Carla said, her voice calm but tinged with urgency. "The first wave of replacements is already being contacted, and the audits are starting. I've also made sure to schedule a meeting with the legal team for tomorrow morning. We need to make sure everything is done by the book." Vanessa nodded, even though Carla couldn't see her. "Good. Keep me updated. I need everything in order before the board meeting on Friday. I want to make sure that this time, we take action, not just make promises. We need to show them we are serious about this." There was a brief silence before Carla spoke again. "Understood. And Vanessa, I just wanted to say, you were right. I mean, everything you've said. It's time. I'm with you on this." Vanessa smiled faintly, appreciating the support. "Thanks, Carla. But we're not done yet." She hung up, her mind already working ahead, thinking of the next steps. She could hear the distant hum of the city outside her office windows. It was a reminder of how much work lay ahead, how many voices had been silenced, how many people had been dismissed because they didn't fit the mold. But that was about to change. "It starts now," Vanessa murmured to herself as she opened another file. She wasn't going to let anything stand in her way, not the old guard, not the status quo, and certainly not the biases that had festered for far too long. She was rebuilding Summit Enterprises, brick by brick, and this time, it would be built on a foundation of respect and accountability. The phone buzzed again, and this time, it was the head of HR. "Vanessa," the voice said, sounding a bit more frantic than usual. "I just spoke to one of the top executives. They're asking if we're really going through with this. They're pushing back. What should I tell them?" Vanessa's eyes narrowed as she set the file down. She knew the pushback would come. They had always been able to hide behind their positions, their titles, their networks, but not anymore. "Tell them," Vanessa said, her voice sharp, "that the changes are non-negotiable. We're doing this because it's the right thing to do, and if they don't like it, they can walk. We're not here to make people comfortable. We're here to make this company better." The words came out with an authority that even surprised her. It was no longer about proving a point. It was about setting a new standard, and she was determined to do just that. She took a deep breath and walked over to the window, staring out at the skyline. She had spent years working to get to this position, and now it was her time to make a real impact. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but Vanessa Clark was ready. Summit Enterprises had been her dream, and now she would shape it into something that would stand the test of time, a place where everyone could thrive, regardless of their race, gender, or background. This was just the beginning. The morning after Vanessa's decision to reshape Summit Enterprises, the atmosphere in the office felt charged with an electricity that couldn't be ignored. Executives, some still in disbelief, had started to process the shift in power, but the unease was palpable. No one was quite sure what to expect next, but they were all certain of one thing: Vanessa Clark was no longer someone they could overlook. As Vanessa walked into the boardroom for the scheduled meeting, the faces of the executives were a mixture of discomfort and apprehension. They had been called in early, and some of them had been stewing in the consequences of their actions all night. The same faces that had dismissed her as just another token CEO were now waiting for her instructions, unsure whether they were about to be fired or offered another chance. She entered the room, composed, her eyes steady as she scanned the table, meeting the gaze of each person there. Vanessa didn't need to say a word at first. The silence spoke volumes. She took her seat at the head of the table, the chair feeling different today. It wasn't just a seat of power, it was a seat of action. one that she would use to redefine everything in this company. "Good morning," she said, her voice cool but commanding. "I trust you've all had some time to think about the changes we discussed last night." The executives nodded, but none of them spoke. "Let me be clear," Vanessa continued, her gaze sweeping across the room. "This company is no longer a place for comfort. It's not a place where decisions are made behind closed doors, protected by status and favoritism. From now on, every decision will be transparent, and every action will be held accountable. You will have to prove you are worthy of your positions." The tension in the room grew tighter, but Vanessa remained calm, unwavering in her resolve. She had come too far to back down now. "I've already spoken with HR, and we've started the audit. There will be a full review of all departments, every level of management, and every process that has allowed inequality to thrive. If you are found to be part of that system, you will be removed, no exceptions." She paused, letting the gravity of her words sink in. The air was thick with the weight of what was to come. Vanessa had known this day would come, the day when her leadership would be tested by those who thought they were untouchable. And for those of you who think this is just a phase, or that I will back off when things get difficult, let me assure you I will not. I am here to build a legacy, not just a company, and I won't let anyone stand in the way of that. She leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped on the table, her tone firm. "Your job now is simple. You will work to earn the trust of everyone in this room and the people outside it. You will show them, through your actions, that you are worthy of leading this company forward. And if you can't, you will step aside." Vanessa's words were like a challenge thrown down in front of them, daring them to rise to the occasion, to prove that they were capable of change. As she spoke, her assistant Carla entered the room, quietly handing her another file. It was a list, names, dates, and all the specifics of the people who had been wronged, the ones whose contributions had been dismissed or ignored. Vanessa looked over the list for a moment, her eyes narrowing as she reviewed it. "This is where we begin," she said, looking up at the room full of executives. "The names on this list will be the first to be given the opportunities they have long deserved. And as for the rest of you, you will prove you are not part of the problem. If you can't, you will be replaced." There was a long silence as the executives absorbed the gravity of her words. Some looked down at their hands, others shifted in their seats, but none of them spoke. The atmosphere was thick with uncertainty, but Vanessa knew she was on the right path. She wasn't here to make friends. She was here to make a difference, and she would see it through to the end. "You will all leave this room today with a new understanding of what it means to lead with integrity," Vanessa continued, her voice cutting through the silence. "And if you think you've heard the last of me, think again. This is just the beginning." The room was silent once more, the executives now fully aware that the power dynamic had shifted irreversibly. Vanessa had spoken, and it was clear. There was no going back. The days that followed Vanessa's bold move were filled with a sense of calculated urgency. The executives, though silent during the boardroom meeting, had begun to stir in their corners, sensing the profound shift in power. Vanessa watched them from a distance, their every move now scrutinized under the new rules of accountability. It wasn't just about changing policies, it was about changing mindsets, about making every person in the company recognize that complacency would no longer be tolerated. The first round of audits had begun, and with each report that came across Vanessa's desk, the depth of the systemic issues within Summit Enterprises became more apparent. Names and faces she had never known before appeared, people whose complaints had been ignored, whose contributions had been dismissed, because they didn't fit the image the company had long held. Vanessa took no pleasure in the findings. It was not about proving a point, it was about doing the right thing. As she read through the reports, one name stood out to her: Maya Reed, a senior strategist who had been overlooked for years, despite her groundbreaking work. Maya's file was filled with praise from her colleagues, yet every promotion she had earned was denied by management. Vanessa made a note to meet with her personally. She knew the kind of talent that had been wasted, and she wasn't going to let that happen again. Later that afternoon, Carla knocked softly before entering Vanessa's office, carrying a thick envelope. "This is from HR," Carla said, setting it down on Vanessa's desk. "The first round of personnel changes is complete. The replacements are in place. Those who were removed have already been informed." Vanessa nodded. opening the envelope to find a list of names. There were those who had been complicit in the company's toxic culture, and those who had been silently passed over for years, their careers stunted by unconscious bias. "Good," Vanessa said, her voice steady. "Keep me updated on every move. I want to see everything. We will rebuild this company from the ground up, and it starts with the right people in the right positions." Carla hesitated for a moment before speaking. "Vanessa, I know this is difficult, but do you think some of them will resist? There's a lot of fear in the air." Vanessa looked up, meeting Carla's eyes. "Fear is natural, Carla. It's the first reaction to change. But fear doesn't have to mean failure. What they are afraid of is losing control, but control was never theirs to begin with. It belongs to the people who are willing to earn it, not hoard it." Carla nodded, clearly inspired but still uncertain. "What happens if they push back harder?" she asked. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, a slow smile crossing her face. "Then we push back harder. This is not about making them comfortable. It's about making this company one that works for everyone. If they resist that, they can leave. I won't apologize for that." The conversation shifted, and as Carla walked out, Vanessa turned her attention back to her desk. She picked up Maya's file again and typed a quick message. "Maya, read. Report to my office immediately. We need to talk." She wasn't going to let one more person slip through the cracks. No more wasted talent. No more missed opportunities. As the day wore on, Vanessa felt the weight of her decisions, but also the clarity of purpose. Summit Enterprises was no longer a company driven by a few at the top. It was a company driven by the collective strength of everyone within it. And that strength, she was determined to harness, to build something better, stronger, and more just. Her phone rang, breaking her concentration. It was the legal department. "Vanessa, we've just had a conversation with the remaining executives. Some are beginning to make noise. They don't like the way things are changing." Vanessa's expression hardened as she picked up the phone. "Tell them this change is inevitable. They either adapt or they leave. This is not a negotiation. It's a new reality." She hung up the phone, a deep sense of resolve settling over her. Vanessa Clark was not just a CEO. She was the force that would reshape the future of Summit Enterprises, and no one would stand in her way. The following days unfolded with a steady rhythm of decisions and changes as Vanessa Clark continued her relentless overhaul of Summit Enterprises. Word of the restructuring had spread throughout the building, and the once calm and orderly halls were now buzzing with whispers and uncertainty. Some of the employees, particularly those in middle management, were beginning to feel the pressure, unsure whether their jobs were secure or if their complacency would catch up with them. Vanessa wasn't worried about that. She knew that change would be uncomfortable for many, but it was necessary. Every department, every team, every individual needed to be reminded of the company's new direction, one where merit and respect were the only currencies that mattered. She had already made sure that the new policies were in place, but it was time for the real work to begin, making sure the leadership understood that their days of skating by on privilege were over. Later in the week, as Vanessa sat in her office, a knock echoed through the door. It was Carla, looking more serious than usual. "Vanessa, we need to talk," she said, stepping inside and closing the door behind her. "It's about the board members. They're starting to panic. Some of them are threatening to resign." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "Resign?" she repeated, leaning back in her chair. "Let them. I didn't bring them here to hold on to their positions out of fear. I brought them here to lead. If they can't handle change, then they're not fit to lead." Carla paused, then spoke again, her tone cautious. "But they're still influential. Some of them are questioning whether the company will remain stable under these changes. They want to know if you're going to back down or compromise." Vanessa felt her pulse steady as she leaned forward, eyes fixed on Carla. "There will be no compromise. Not now, not ever. I've been patient long enough, Carla. I've allowed people to take advantage of their positions for too long. This company belongs to everyone who works here, not just a few at the top. If they can't handle that, then they can go find another company to run." Carla nodded, but there was still a hint of concern in her eyes. "I understand, but you know how they can be. These are people who have been in power for years, who've built their entire careers on a system that favors them. This will not be easy." Vanessa smiled, a quiet, assured smile. Nothing worth fighting for is easy. But what's easy isn't worth having. These people have had their time, Carla. Now, it's time for the rest of us to have ours. She paused, then added, make sure the legal team is ready. If anyone wants to push back, we'll handle it. But the new Summit Enterprises is non-negotiable. I won't back down. As Carla left the office to carry out her tasks, Vanessa's thoughts turned inward. She knew that the road ahead wouldn't be smooth. There would be resistance. There would be battles. But in the end, it would all be worth it. This wasn't just about changing the leadership. It was about changing the culture. She had to rebuild trust. But more importantly, she had to tear down the walls that had kept so many people out for so long. The building blocks of her vision were now in place. All that remained was to watch as everything shifted, piece by piece. And as she looked out over the city, her mind sharpened with determination. Vanessa knew one thing for sure. She wasn't going to stop until the job was done. Vanessa spent the following days moving swiftly through the changes she had set in motion. The new Summit Enterprises was taking shape, but not without its challenges. Some employees had embraced the shift, eager for a fresh start, while others still clung to the old ways, wary of the changes that were making their once secure positions uncertain. But Vanessa had no intention of slowing down. The truth was that the company needed this transformation, needed it to survive. She knew that the internal upheaval would be uncomfortable, but she also knew that it was the only path to true progress. As the weeks passed, the tension in the building remained palpable. The new policies were taking root, but it became clear that the executives she had shaken up were beginning to organize. There were whispers of a council being formed, a group of the old guard banding together to push back against the sweeping changes Vanessa was implementing. The first signs of revolt came when one of the senior executives, once a close ally of Vanessa, began to question the long-term viability of the new approach. "We need to talk," the executive, Thomas, said one afternoon, requesting a meeting in her office. Vanessa was ready for this. She had anticipated the pushback. As Thomas entered the room, she didn't waste time with pleasantries. "Let's get to it." "Thomas," she said, her voice calm but firm. He took a seat across from her, clearly uncomfortable. "Vanessa," he started, his tone cautious, "I understand what you're trying to do, but it's a big risk. You're asking people to abandon everything they know, everything that's worked for them for years. People don't just change overnight." Vanessa didn't flinch at the criticism. She had been expecting it. She leaned forward slightly, her hands clasped together. "I'm not asking them to abandon everything, Thomas. I'm asking them to acknowledge that the system they've built isn't working for everyone. The people in this company, the ones you're ignoring, they matter. Their voices matter, and they deserve a chance." She paused, her gaze unwavering. "We cannot continue with business as usual. That's not an option." Thomas shifted in his seat, clearly unsettled by her resolve. "But you're pushing people too far too fast," he countered, his voice rising. "This kind of change, it's not sustainable. You're alienating the people who helped build this company." Vanessa's eyes narrowed. "No, Thomas, you've misunderstood. I'm not alienating anyone who's willing to adapt. I'm pushing out the ones who refuse to change, the ones who have kept this company stagnant and have used their power to maintain the status quo. Those are the people who need to go." Thomas stared at her, a mix of disbelief and frustration on his face. "You're creating a divide. The company is going to fall apart." Vanessa remained calm, the weight of her words settling heavily in the room. "No, Thomas, the divide was already here. You just didn't see it. It's time to open our eyes and do the right thing." She stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. "If you can't get behind this vision, then it's time for you to reconsider your position here. But I won't stop. Not now, not ever. This company will change, and it will be better for it." As Thomas left, his expression conflicted, Vanessa felt a surge of determination. She knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. There would be more pushback, more challenges from those who had profited from inequality. But with every step, Vanessa knew she was moving closer to the future she had envisioned, a future where everyone at Summit Enterprises had a seat at the table, where power was no longer a privilege, but a shared responsibility. And she would see it through, no matter the cost. The atmosphere inside Summit Enterprises was tense. The days following Vanessa's last confrontation with Thomas had only added fuel to the fire. The executives were increasingly agitated, and whispers of discontent were spreading like wildfire through the building. Vanessa knew the challenges she faced would only grow more complicated, but she was resolute. This was not a battle she was going to lose. She had spent years fighting to be seen, to be heard, and now that she had power, she would use it to reshape the very core of the company. As she walked down the hallway to the boardroom, her footsteps were deliberate, the sound of her heels echoing off the walls. She had made it clear change would happen, with or without the old guard. The door to the boardroom swung open, and the executives inside quickly fell silent. Vanessa had summoned them here for one purpose, to show them that there would be no more hesitation, no more delays. She stood at the head of the table, her presence commanding attention. "I trust you've all had time to think about the changes we've started implementing," Vanessa said, her tone even but firm. "Some of you may still have doubts. Some of you may even be questioning whether you're cut out for what's coming next. Let me be clear, there is no going back. The system of favoritism and inequality you've built is over. The new Summit Enterprises will be a place where everyone is given a chance to succeed, regardless of their background." A few of the executives exchanged uneasy glances, but none of them spoke. Vanessa continued, her voice cutting through the silence like a knife. "Some of you have already voiced your concerns. I've heard the murmurs. Some of you believe that this change is too fast, too drastic. But the truth is, it's long overdue. You are here because you were trusted to lead. But leadership isn't about maintaining the status quo. It's about recognizing when change is necessary and acting on it. And if you can't do that, then you are in the wrong place." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the room. The first wave of replacements has already been made. The new hires are in place, and they are here to make sure that this company stays on the right path. From now on, you will answer to them. They will hold you accountable for your actions. If you don't like that, then you know what to do. Vanessa's eyes scanned the room, locking with each executive as she spoke, making sure they understood the gravity of what she was saying. "But let me make this very clear," she added, her voice lowering just enough to ensure everyone was listening. "I am not doing this for the people you're worried about losing. I'm doing this for the future of Summit Enterprises, for every employee who has been overlooked, for every person who has been told they don't belong here. This is for them." The silence in the room was deafening, but Vanessa could feel the shift. The executives had heard her loud and clear. They understood that resistance would only lead to more consequences. She was in control now. "We are moving forward with the new structure," she said, standing taller, her voice growing stronger. "We will be transparent. We will be fair. We will be accountable. And those who cannot live up to that will be shown the door." As she finished speaking, she turned and walked towards the door, knowing full well that this meeting, this moment, would be a turning point for the company. It was no longer about her proving herself. It was about them proving they were worthy of leading Summit Enterprises into the future. With each step, Vanessa knew that the foundation of the company was shifting beneath her feet. She wasn't just changing a few policies or replacing a few people, she was changing the very culture of Summit Enterprises. And there was no going back. The following days were filled with a sense of urgency and change as Vanessa's vision for Summit Enterprises began to take shape. The executives who had once clung to the old ways were now on notice. Those who resisted were slowly being removed, replaced by fresh faces eager to embrace the new culture she was building. The company was shifting, and it was clear to everyone that the old system where power was held by a select few, based on bias and favoritism, was no longer tolerated. As Vanessa walked through the halls of Summit Enterprises, she felt the weight of the transformation she had sparked. The air was still thick with uncertainty, but there was also a quiet excitement building among the employees. Those who had been sidelined for years now saw an opportunity, a chance to rise, to finally be recognized for their hard work and talent. Vanessa knew this wasn't going to be easy, but she also knew that the foundation was being laid for something stronger, something more inclusive, something that would stand the test of time. She had taken the first step, and now she had to ensure the company followed through. Later that afternoon, as she sat in her office, reviewing the latest reports from HR and legal, Carla entered with a fresh batch of updates. "Vanessa, everything's progressing according to plan," Carla said. handing over a folder. The new team members are already making their mark. The departments are responding well to the changes. It's not perfect, but it's moving in the right direction. Vanessa took the folder, glancing through the pages, her sharp eyes scanning each detail. Good, she said, her voice steady but full of purpose. We're not looking for perfection just yet. We're looking for progress. Every step we take is a step toward creating a culture where talent is valued over status, where people are judged by their ability, not their appearance. That's what Summit Enterprises will be known for. Carla hesitated for a moment, then spoke, her voice softer. Vanessa, there's still some pushback, especially from the higher-ups. Some of the older executives are struggling to let go of their power. They're not used to being held accountable. They're afraid. Vanessa looked up, her expression hardening slightly. Fear is natural, she said, her tone calm but unwavering. But it doesn't matter. Change isn't easy for anyone, especially for those who've been comfortable for so long. Let them be afraid. As long as they're willing to work for this new vision, they'll stay. If not, they'll leave. And I'll have no problem with that. Carla nodded, her admiration for Vanessa growing as she spoke. Understood. I'll make sure we stay on track. Vanessa leaned back in her chair, feeling a surge of determination. This is just the beginning, Carla, she said, her voice steady but resolute. We've made the first moves, but now we need to make sure this company evolves. We need to make sure that the changes we've set in motion stick, that they become the new normal. This is my legacy, and I will not let anyone stand in the way of it. As Carla left, Vanessa sat alone for a moment, her gaze shifting to the skyline outside her office. She could see the future ahead of her, a future where Summit Enterprises was a model of inclusivity, equality, and success. It wouldn't be easy. There would be more challenges ahead, but Vanessa was ready. She had already proven that she was more than capable of facing whatever came her way. This was her time, and nothing could stop her from making Summit Enterprises a company where everyone, regardless of their background, had the chance to succeed.